Having a little trouble there? Daniel Whitmore slowed his stride but did not immediately stop. The question came out smooth, polite, automatic. The kind of thing a man says when he intends to keep moving. The little girl looked up from her pink tricycle, which sat tilted awkwardly on the paved path in Grant Park. "My bike won't go," she said. "It won't run anymore." Her voice was steady, no tears, just a quiet report of mechanical injustice. The October wind moved through the park, carrying the faint scent of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor and the sharper chill of Lake Michigan. Behind Daniel, Chicago's skyline rose in clean lines of steel and glass. One of those buildings carried his name near the top. Whitmore Technologies, 40 years old, self-made billionaire, publicly admired, privately disciplined, a man who solved problems. He set his briefcase down beside him and crouched. "Well," he said, calmly, examining the front wheel. "Let's see what's going on." The axle had slipped loose, the bolt slightly misaligned. A simple fix. He steadied the frame and adjusted the wheel carefully, fingers precise despite the cold metal. "You riding fast?" he asked lightly. "I was racing the pigeons," she replied. "I was winning." A brief, reluctant smile touched his mouth. He tightened the axle by hand and tested the spin. "There," he said. "Try now." She climbed back onto the seat and pushed forward. The wheel turned smoothly. She stopped in front of him, face lifted in satisfaction. That was when he truly saw her. Her eyes caught the late afternoon light. One was a soft blue-gray, the other a deep brown. The contrast was striking, unusual, beautiful. Daniel straightened slowly. "Your eyes are very beautiful," he said, his tone quieter now. "They're quite special." She blinked at him. "Thank you." "May I ask," he continued gently, "who you got them from?" "My mom," she answered immediately. "She says they run in her family." He nodded, studying her face with careful neutrality. "And is your mother here with you?" The girl turned and pointed toward a bench beneath a cluster of bare trees. "She's right there." Daniel followed her small hand. At first, he only saw a figure, dark coat, hair pulled back, standing slightly apart from the older woman seated beside her. The wind shifted, and the standing woman turned halfway toward the path. Daniel felt something inside him go completely still. He hadn't seen that face in years. Not in person, not up close. Time had softened certain features, sharpened others. There was maturity there now, and something else, resilience. But it was unmistakable. Monica. The name moved through his mind like a shockwave. For a brief moment, he questioned his own certainty. Chicago was large. Years changed people. Memory sometimes played tricks. But no, it was her. The distance between them was no more than 30 yards, yet it felt like a decade stretched thin across cold air. Daniel became acutely aware of his breathing. He had not expected to encounter any ghosts that afternoon. He looked back down at the little girl Annie. The resemblance wasn't obvious in features. It was something quieter, the posture, the steadiness. The way she met his gaze without fear. "What's your name?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer might matter. "Annie." "Annie what?" "Annie Monroe." The surname landed in his chest with a weight he did not show on his face. "Monroe." He swallowed slowly. "Annie," he said gently, keeping his voice even. "It's good your mom is close by." She nodded. "I don't go far," she said. "She tells me not to." "That's smart," Daniel replied. "You should always stay where she can see you. Parks can be busy." Annie looked around, as if suddenly considering that possibility. Then she glanced back at him. "Are you a dad?" she asked with childlike curiosity. The question caught him unprepared. He hesitated just a fraction of a second too long. "No," he said finally. "Not yet." She seemed to accept that without judgment. "Well," she announced, "you fix things like one." The words settled somewhere deep inside him. Daniel managed a composed nod. "I'm glad your wheel is working again," he said. "But stay close to your mom, all right?" "I will." She pushed off gently and rode back toward the bench. Daniel remained standing where he was. Monica had noticed him now. Their eyes met across the open stretch of grass. No smile, no wave, just recognition, the kind that doesn't need confirmation. The wind lifted slightly, brushing across the park and through Daniel's coat. Behind him, the towering buildings stood firm and unshaken symbols of control. of carefully constructed success. But as he watched Annie reach her mother and stop beside her, something inside him shifted. He had spent years building a life defined by forward motion expansion, innovation, growth charts that climbed cleanly upward. Yet in a single, ordinary moment, standing beside a child's broken tricycle, the past had stepped quietly back into view. He picked up his briefcase slowly, and for the first time in a very long while, Daniel Whitmore felt something he could not measure, predict, or immediately solve. The wheel was repaired, but something else had just come undone. Monica did not wave. She did not smile. She simply stood there, one hand resting lightly on Annie's shoulder as the child climbed off the tricycle and began explaining, with animated gestures, how the man fixed it. Daniel remained where he was for several seconds after Annie reached her. The wind pushed against his back, urging him forward, but his feet felt rooted to the pavement. Monica's eyes lifted to meet his again. Recognition passed between them without ceremony. Years had carved quiet lines into her face, but her posture remained straight, dignified. She wore a dark wool coat, modest but well kept. No jewelry beyond a small silver cross at her neck. Nothing extravagant, nothing careless. She said something to Annie too soft for him to hear. Annie nodded, then began riding small circles close to the bench, obediently staying within sight. Daniel picked up his briefcase. He could leave now. He could nod politely from a distance, step away, and allow this moment to dissolve into something unspoken. Chicago was a city of millions. People crossed paths and never met again. That would be the sensible thing, but sensible had a way of feeling hollow. He took a step forward, then another. Monica did not retreat. She waited. Up close, the years between them felt thinner than they should have. The scent of autumn leaves mixed with faint traces of laundry, soap, and cold air. Annie's tricycle wheels hummed softly in short circles nearby. "Monica," he said. Her name sounded unfamiliar in his mouth, as though he hadn't earned the right to speak it. "Daniel," she replied. No anger in her voice, no warmth either, just acknowledgement. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said carefully. "It's a public park," she answered evenly. "We come here most afternoons. Annie likes the pigeons." He nodded. She mentioned that. A brief silence settled between them, filled by the distant laughter of other children and the rhythmic spin of the repaired wheel. Daniel cleared his throat.
Understood.
"I didn't know you were still in the city." "I never left," she said. The words were simple, direct, unadorned. He absorbed that. "I see you're doing well," she added, glancing briefly toward the skyline behind him. "Your name's hard to miss." He almost smiled, but it faded quickly. "Yes, the company's grown. That's good." There was something unsettling about her calmness. He had prepared, without realizing it, for accusation or bitterness. Instead, she offered composure. He glanced toward Annie again. "She's 6?" he asked. 6 in March. He calculated without meaning to. The timing pressed against his ribs. "She has remarkable eyes," he said quietly. Monica's expression shifted, not in surprise but in recognition of where the conversation was heading. "Yes," she said. "She does." Daniel hesitated, choosing each word with care. "I asked her who she got them from. And she told you." He met her gaze directly now. "She said they run in your family." "They do." The wind moved between them again, colder this time. "I didn't know," he said. "About anything." Monica studied him for a long moment. "I didn't expect you would," she replied. The statement was neither defensive nor accusatory. It was simply factual. Annie's laughter rang out as she made a tight turn, the wheel holding steady. Daniel watched her for a moment, then looked back at Monica. "I want to be clear," he said, lowering his voice. "If there's something I should know." Monica's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You should have wanted to know a long time ago." The words were quiet, but they landed firmly. He absorbed them without protest. "You disappeared," he said. "No," she corrected gently. "I was asked to leave." If this story moved you even a little, don't just scroll away. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. Your voice matters here. And if you believe in stories about truth, second chances, and quiet justice, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it keeps these stories coming. I'll see you in the next one. He felt that. I was told you. I know what you were told. Another pause. Annie slowed her riding and watched them now, sensing the shift in tone. Monica softened her voice slightly. I didn't come looking for you, Daniel, she said. Not then, not now. Why not? Because some doors, she answered, are closed for a reason. He felt something tighten in his chest. And Annie? He asked, unable to stop himself. Does she know? She knows she's loved, Monica said firmly. That's what matters. He nodded slowly. I wasn't aware, he repeated. If I had known, what would you have done? She asked, not unkindly. The question hovered between them. He did not answer immediately, because he wasn't certain. Annie pedaled over toward them, stopping a few feet away. Mom, can we get hot chocolate after this? She asked brightly. We'll see, Monica replied. Daniel looked at the child at the steady gaze, the mismatched eyes that seemed to hold more than they should. He crouched slightly to Annie's level again. You did a good job staying close, he told her. That's important, she nodded solemnly. I always do. That's smart, he said. You should never go too far from your mom. I won't, she promised. He stood again, facing Monica. I don't want to cause disruption, he said quietly. But I would like to talk. Properly. Monica studied him, weighing something. There's nothing casual about this conversation, she said. I understand. Another pause. Tomorrow, she said finally, there's a coffee shop on Wabash. 10 in the morning. Annie will be in school. He nodded. I'll be there. She didn't offer a handshake. Neither did he. Annie waved again as Daniel stepped back. Bye, Mr. Daniel, he said gently. Bye, Daniel. He gave her a small nod and turned away. The skyline loomed ahead of him once more, unchanged, but each step toward it felt heavier than the last. He had built his life on decisive actions, on confronting problems head-on, on scaling obstacles until they no longer intimidated him. Yet as he walked toward Columbus Drive, briefcase in hand, a new weight pressed against him. Not scandal, not financial risk, something older, something human. For the first time in years, Daniel Whitmore was not thinking about stock prices or investor confidence. He was thinking about a 6-year-old girl with 2 different eyes, and a conversation scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. He reached his waiting car and paused before opening the door. For years, forward had been the only direction he allowed himself to consider. Now, for the first time, forward meant walking straight into something he had once chosen not to see. He slid into the back seat. Home, sir? The driver asked. Daniel stared out the window as the park receded behind them. No, he said after a moment. Take me to the office. There were questions to prepare for, and answers he might finally have to hear. Daniel arrived at his office long after the downtown lights had begun to glow against the darkening sky. Whitmore Technologies occupied the top 20 floors of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. At night, the building felt less like a workplace and more like a monument. Polished stone floors, silent elevators, security desks, staffed by men who stood straighter when he entered. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore, the guard said. Daniel nodded and moved past him without slowing. Upstairs, the executive floor was nearly empty. Most employees had gone home hours ago. Only the faint hum of climate control and the distant whir of a cleaning cart broke the silence. He stepped into his office and closed the door behind him. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in sharp detail, bridges lit in amber, traffic flowing in neat lines. The steady rhythm of a place that never paused for personal reckoning. He set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. Monica never left. The words repeated in his mind. He moved to his desk and opened his laptop, more from habit than intention. Emails flooded the screen. Market analysis, product rollouts, investor briefings, all urgent, all measurable. None of them explained a 6-year-old girl with 2 different eyes. He leaned back in his chair. Annie's voice replayed in his head. I don't know, my dad. The simplicity of it unsettled him more than accusation would have. He rose again and walked to the window. From this height, the city looked orderly, manageable. Problems reduced to patterns of light. But people were not markets. People did not follow projections. His phone buzzed on the desk behind him. He turned. Caller ID. Thomas Whitmore. His father rarely called at night unless something required immediate attention. Daniel let it ring once more before answering. Dad, I just finished reviewing tomorrow's agenda, Thomas said without preamble. His voice was crisp, controlled. "We need you sharp." "I'll be there." A pause. "You sound distracted." Daniel considered denying it. "I ran into someone today," he said instead. Silence on the other end. "Who?" "Monica." The name hung between them like a fragile structure under strain. Another pause, longer this time. "That's not possible," Thomas replied flatly. "It is. You must be mistaken." "I'm not." Daniel could almost picture his father's expression tightening. "And what exactly did she want?" Thomas asked. "She didn't want anything." "That's unlikely." Daniel inhaled slowly. "She has a daughter." The silence this time was not confusion. It was calculation. "How old?" Thomas asked carefully. 6. A longer pause followed. "That proves nothing," Thomas said at last. "I'm meeting her tomorrow morning," Daniel continued. "You will do no such thing." "I already agreed." The shift in tone was subtle but unmistakable. "You are the CEO of a publicly traded company," Thomas said. "You do not engage in private meetings that can be misinterpreted. This isn't about the company. Everything is about the company." Daniel felt something inside him harden. "It's about responsibility." "You were 32, Thomas snapped. "Young, careless. We handled it." Daniel turned sharply away from the window. "We handled it," he repeated quietly. "Is that what you call it?" Thomas exhaled through his nose. "She was compensated generously." "For leaving?" "For discretion." The word landed cold. Daniel stared out at the river below. "And if there's more to this?" he asked. "There isn't," Thomas replied sharply. "And if you have any sense, you will ensure there never is." The implication was clear. Control the narrative, protect the name, end the conversation before it begins. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. For years, he had followed that blueprint without questioning it. "You don't know that," he said finally. "I know enough," Thomas answered. "You will not jeopardize everything we built over a mistake." Daniel felt the word mistake scrape against something raw inside him. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, ending the call before his father could respond. The office returned to silence. He placed the phone down carefully. "We handled it." He walked to the small bar cabinet against the far wall and poured himself a measure of bourbon. The amber liquid caught the light, steady and familiar. He did not drink it immediately. Instead, he thought of Annie's small hands gripping the handlebars, of the way she had looked at him when she asked if broken things could be fixed. He finally took a slow sip. The burn was sharp, grounding. Tomorrow at 10, a coffee shop on Wabash. No boardroom, no attorneys, no advisors, just answers. He set the glass down untouched after that first swallow. Then he returned to his desk and opened a new document. Not a business memo, not a shareholder update. A list. He typed, slowly. Dates, timelines. 8 years ago. Fundraiser in June. Monica dismissed the following week. If Annie was 6 now, he stopped typing. He didn't want to do the math. He leaned back in his chair again, staring at the ceiling. For years, success had insulated him, protected him from looking backward. Forward motion had been his shield, but forward no longer felt simple. It felt like a crossroads. Outside, the river reflected the city lights in fractured patterns. Daniel Whitmore had built an empire by confronting risk. Yet tonight, alone in his office, he realized the greatest risk might not be financial. It might be personal. And for the first time in a very long while, he was not certain which outcome frightened him more, the possibility that Annie was his daughter, or the possibility that she wasn't. Daniel did not sleep. He lay awake in his high-rise condominium, overlooking the river, watching faint reflections of traffic lights ripple across the ceiling. Chicago moved even at midnight, sirens in the distance, the low murmur of late trains, wind brushing against glass 30 stories up. At 6:12 a.m., he gave up pretending. By 7, he was dressed in a charcoal overcoat instead of his usual tailored suit jacket. No tie. He told himself it was because this was not a corporate meeting, not official, not strategic. At 9:42 a.m., he stood outside the coffee shop on Wabash. It was small, independent, nothing like the polished cafes where executives held quiet negotiations. The window displayed hand-lettered chalk menus. Inside, warm lights spilled onto the sidewalk. He checked his watch. 10 minutes early. He stepped inside. The scent of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapped around him. A few patrons sat scattered at wooden tables, 2 students with laptops, an older couple sharing a muffin, a delivery driver near the counter stirring sugar into his cup. No one paid him special attention. For once, that felt appropriate. He ordered black coffee and chose a table near the back, one with a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 9:59, the door opened. Monica entered first. She wore a navy coat and carried a worn leather handbag. Her posture was steady, controlled. Daniel stood instinctively. She noticed, but did not comment. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked?" she replied. They sat across from one another, a small wooden table between them. No lawyers, no assistants, no safety net. A barista called out an order behind them. Milk steamed. A chair scraped softly across the floor. Monica folded her hands on the table. "Annie's at school," she said. "She doesn't know about this meeting." "That's probably best," Daniel answered. A pause. He took a breath. "I won't circle around it," he said. "I need clarity." Monica studied him carefully. Clarity about what? About Annie. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "She's my daughter," Monica said evenly. "I understand that," he replied. "But biologically, she's mine," Monica repeated. Daniel held her gaze. "I'm not here to deny responsibility," he said quietly. "I'm here because I need to know if I have one." Silence stretched between them. Monica looked down at her folded hands for a moment, then back up. "You remember the fundraiser?" she said. "Yes." "You remember what happened afterward?" "I do." "You remember that I was asked to leave?" He nodded. "I was told you'd taken something." A faint, almost sad smile touched her lips. "Yes," she said. "That was the story." Daniel felt the heat rise slightly in his chest. "Was it?" "No." The word was simple. "No," she continued. "I didn't steal anything." He believed her. He wasn't sure why, but he did. "I was pregnant," she said calmly. The coffee shop noise seemed to dull around them. Daniel did not move. "I found out 2 weeks after I left," she continued. "I didn't have your number. I didn't have your address. And even if I had..." She stopped herself. "Even if you had?" he prompted gently. She met his eyes. "Your father made it very clear that contact would not be welcome." The words were not bitter. They were measured. "You could have tried," Daniel said. "And risk what?" she asked quietly. "A denial? Lawyers? Being told I was lying?" He had no answer. Monica leaned back slightly. "I was 28, she continued. "Working 2 jobs after I left. My parents were gone. I had no safety net. And I never asked you for money," she finished. "Because I didn't want Annie growing up as someone's quiet settlement." Daniel swallowed. "You should have told me," he said softly. "I shouldn't have had to," she replied. The truth of that settled heavily. A waitress passed their table, refilling Daniel's coffee. Neither of them touched their cups. "Does Annie know?" he asked. "She knows she doesn't have a father in the house," Monica answered. "She knows some families look different." "Does she know my name?" "No." The relief he felt surprised him. "And if she were to find out?" he pressed. Monica studied him again. "That depends on you," she said. He straightened slightly. "Omi, yes. On whether you intend to be present or simply curious." The distinction cut deeper than accusation. Daniel looked down at his hands. For years, decisions had been simple. Assess risk, weigh cost, act. This was not that. "I don't want to disrupt her life," he said carefully. "She already has a life," Monica replied. "Friends, school, a routine. I'm not looking to take anything from her." "Good." Another pause. "If I asked for a paternity test," he said quietly, "would you refuse?" Monica did not answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "Why?" "Because I need to know the truth." She considered that. "And if the test confirms what you suspect, then I'll accept responsibility. And if it doesn't," he hesitated, "then at least we both have certainty." Monica watched him for a long moment, as if measuring something deeper than words. "You understand," she said slowly, "that this isn't just about you finding out. It's about what happens afterward." "I understand." "No," she said gently. "I don't think you do." Daniel felt that land. She leaned forward slightly. "If Annie is yours, she doesn't become a press statement. She doesn't become a quiet check. She doesn't become leverage in a boardroom." "She wouldn't," he said firmly. Monica's eyes searched his face for hesitation. "You're a powerful man, Daniel," she said. "Power attracts consequences." He nodded. So does silence, he replied. That gave her pause. The room seemed warmer now, though neither of them had touched their coffee. All right, Monica said at last. If you want the test, we'll do it. The finality of her tone sent a ripple through him. We'll handle it privately, she added. No lawyers, no announcements. Agreed. And until we have results, she said firmly. You will not approach Annie as anything other than a man who fixed her bike. He accepted that without argument. That's fair. Monica reached for her cup but still did not drink. Daniel, she said quietly, this isn't about revenge. I built a life for her, a steady one. I'm not here to tear that down. She nodded once. Then we'll see what the truth says. The weight of it settled fully now. Truth. No board vote, no negotiation, just biology. Daniel finally lifted his coffee and took a slow sip. It had gone lukewarm. Thank you, he said. Monica stood. I'll call you with the appointment details. He rose as well. She paused before leaving. For what it's worth, she added softly, Annie likes you. He exhaled quietly. I'm glad. Monica walked toward the door without looking back. Daniel remained standing by the table long after she had gone. For years, uncertainty had been something he eliminated swiftly. Now, he had invited it in, and there would be no controlling what it revealed. The clinic was discreet, not the kind of place celebrities used for cosmetic adjustments or executives for stress-related consultations. This building was older brick, narrow windows, a brass plaque near the entrance that read Lakeview Medical Diagnostics in modest lettering. Daniel arrived 5 minutes early. He had chosen to come alone. No driver, no assistant, no black SUV idling at the curb. Monica stood near the entrance when he approached, hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. Annie was not with her. School, Monica said, as if reading the question in his eyes. He nodded. Inside, the waiting room was quiet. Neutral walls. Framed watercolor prints of Lake Michigan. A muted television mounted in the corner played a daytime news segment. No one was watching. They signed in under their legal names. No aliases. Daniel noticed the slight pause from the receptionist when she recognized him, but professionalism overrode curiosity. Just a standard paternity panel, the nurse explained when they were called back. Results within 72 hours. 72 hours. Daniel had negotiated billion-dollar mergers in less time, yet the number felt immense. They were led into a small clinical room, white cabinets, stainless steel tray, cotton swabs neatly arranged. The nurse spoke in a calm, routine tone. Swab from the inside of your cheek. It's painless. Daniel nodded. He had faced investor revolts, regulatory hearings, market crashes. His pulse had never felt like this. Monica watched silently as the nurse handed him the swab. He opened his mouth, allowed the sample to be taken. Simple, clinical, detached. A sterile act with irreversible weight. Monica followed. When it was done, the nurse sealed the samples in a small labeled container. That's it, she said with a reassuring smile. We'll contact you as soon as results are ready. Just like that. No drama. No music swelling in the background. Just science. Outside, the late morning air felt colder than before. For a moment, neither of them moved. It's done, Monica said quietly. Yes. He searched her face for signs of fear, hope, regret, anything that might mirror what churned inside him. Instead, she remained composed. I'll call when they contact me, she said. Or me, he replied. A small nod. Then she turned and walked toward the bus stop instead of the parking lot. Daniel watched her go. She didn't look back. He stood there longer than necessary, hands in his coat pockets, staring at the clinic door as if expecting it to call him back inside and reverse the process. 3 days. 72 hours. He returned to his office, but work felt abstract. In the boardroom that afternoon, financial charts projected across a wide screen. Revenue curves, market expansion, a new product launch timeline. Daniel, he realized someone had asked him a question. Yes, he responded automatically. We're projecting a 12% increase in Q3 if the Seattle rollout stays on track, his CFO continued. Daniel nodded, though the numbers seemed strangely distant. His father sat at the far end of the table, posture rigid. Thomas Whitmore's eyes lingered on him longer than usual. After the meeting, Thomas closed the boardroom door behind them. You went through with it, he said. Yes, you're inviting instability. I'm inviting truth. Thomas's jaw tightened. Truth is rarely clean, he said. It complicates structures. So does denial, Daniel replied evenly. His father stepped closer, lowering his voice. If this child is yours, it becomes leverage. Do you understand that? She's not leverage. She will be, Thomas said sharply. Whether you intend it or not. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not anger, but clarity. She's 6, he said. Not a strategy. Thomas studied him carefully. You're allowing emotion to cloud judgment. Maybe, Daniel admitted. Or maybe I've allowed judgment to cloud emotion for too long. That landed. His father straightened. You built this company by making rational decisions. I built it, Daniel said quietly. By taking responsibility. Thomas's expression hardened. Responsibility to shareholders. And to people. Silence settled between them. You will handle this carefully, Thomas said finally. I will handle it honestly. His father left without another word. That evening, Daniel did not return to his condominium immediately. Instead, he drove alone this time toward Southside. He parked 2 blocks from the small apartment building he had seen before. He did not approach the door. He simply sat in the car, engine off, watching as children played on the sidewalk under the watchful eyes of parents leaning against railings. Community. Unpolished. Real. Annie emerged from the building holding what looked like construction paper. She ran toward Monica, who stood nearby speaking with a neighbor. Daniel watched as Annie handed her mother the paper proudly. Monica crouched to Annie's level, listening fully. Present, Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He had grown up in a large house filled with staff. His father had provided everything measurable, but he had rarely crouched, rarely listened without glancing at a watch. Annie laughed at something Monica said. The sound carried faintly through the evening air. Daniel leaned back in his seat. For the first time, the question forming inside him was not about liability or exposure. It was simpler. If she is mine, what kind of father would I be? Not what kind of provider. What kind of father? He glanced once more at the building before starting the engine. 72 hours. He had faced waiting before regulatory approvals, court decisions, but this felt different. This waiting held the power to redraw his entire life. And for the first time, Daniel Whitmore understood something he had once dismissed as sentimental exaggeration. Some truths don't threaten your empire. They reveal whether you deserve one. The first night passed slowly. The second passed slower. By the third morning, time felt distorted, stretching and tightening without warning. Daniel woke before dawn again. Though this time exhaustion pressed heavier against him, he dressed mechanically, poured coffee he barely tasted, and stood at his window watching the river below carry early commuter traffic across its bridges. 72 hours. He checked his phone. No missed calls. No messages. He set it down, then picked it up again. He forced himself to go to the office. Routine, he told himself, is discipline. Discipline is stability. Yet nothing felt stable. At 10:17 a.m., during a product strategy briefing, his phone vibrated once against the polished conference table. Monica. The room continued discussing interface updates and user retention metrics. But Daniel no longer heard them. He excused himself without explanation and stepped into the hallway before answering. Daniel. Her voice was steady. The results are in, she said. His throat tightened. Okay. A pause not for effect, but for breath. It's positive. The word echoed in the quiet corridor. Positive. There was no dramatic swell of sound. No cinematic moment. Just that single word reshaping the air between them. Are you sure? He heard himself ask, though he already knew the answer. Yes. Another silence. She's yours, Monica said softly. Yours. Daniel leaned one hand against the cool wall beside him. A sensation moved through him that was not panic, not fear. Weight. Real. Immovable weight. I see, he said, though he felt anything but composed. Monica did not speak immediately. I thought you should hear it from me, she said. Thank you. I'll be home this evening. He hesitated. May I see her? Another pause. Yes, Monica said finally. But not as an announcement. Not yet. I understand. We'll talk tonight. The call ended. Daniel remained standing in the hallway long after the screen went dark. She's yours. The words replayed in his mind. His daughter. The phrase felt unfamiliar, fragile. He returned to the conference room. Every face turned toward him. Everything all right? His CFO asked. Daniel sat down slowly. Yes, he said. Continue. The presentation resumed, slides shifting across the screen, but the numbers blurred. For years, success had been defined in metrics: growth, expansion, dominance. Now, none of it seemed calibrated for what he had just learned. At noon, he canceled his afternoon meetings. By 3, the news had reached his father. Thomas Whitmore entered Daniel's office without knocking. "It's true," Thomas said flatly. Daniel did not pretend to misunderstand. "Yes." His father closed the door behind him. And what? And what do you intend to do?" Daniel stood from behind his desk. "I intend to meet my daughter tonight." Thomas's expression tightened. "You intend to complicate everything." "I intend to take responsibility." "You don't know what that will cost." Daniel's voice remained level. "I'm beginning to understand what it already has." Thomas moved closer, lowering his tone. "You could arrange support quietly. A trust fund. Education. No publicity. She is not a transaction," Daniel said firmly. "She is a vulnerability," Thomas replied. The word lingered between them. Daniel shook his head. "She's a child, and children grow into liabilities." Something inside Daniel shifted, no longer uncertainty, but resolve. "I won't hide her," he said. "You'll destroy what we built." Daniel met his father's gaze without flinching. "If what we built can't withstand the truth, then it wasn't built very strong." Silence filled the office. Thomas's face hardened, not with anger but with something colder. "You're choosing emotion over legacy. I'm choosing integrity over fear." His father stared at him for a long moment. "You think this makes you noble," Thomas said quietly. "It makes you exposed." "Maybe," Daniel replied. "But I won't let her grow up thinking she was something to be concealed." Thomas turned toward the door. "If this becomes public," he said, "don't expect protection." Daniel did not answer. When the door closed, the office felt larger and emptier. He moved to the window. The city below continued, indifferent to revelations. He checked the time. 5:42. He left the building without escort. The drive south felt longer than usual. When he reached Monica's apartment building, the streetlights were already glowing softly against the early evening sky. He stepped out of the car and approached the entrance slowly. This time, he did not stay 2 blocks away. Monica opened the door before he knocked. "She's inside," she said. Daniel stepped in. The apartment was modest but warm family photos along one wall, a bookshelf filled with children's stories, the faint scent of something homemade simmering on the stove. Annie sat cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring. She looked up. "Hi, Daniel." The simplicity of her greeting struck him. "Hi, Annie." He crouched again, this time deliberately. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A rocket ship," she said proudly. "It's going to the moon." He smiled faintly. "That's ambitious." She nodded seriously. "You have to aim high." He glanced at Monica. Monica's eyes held his for a moment. Not accusation, not gratitude, just understanding. Annie held up her drawing. "Do you think it's good?" Daniel looked at it carefully. "I think," he said slowly, "it's the beginning of something important." She beamed, and as he sat there on the rug, in a small apartment far removed from boardrooms and shareholders, Daniel Whitmore understood with sudden clarity. His life had just divided into before and after. Before, he had built an empire. After, he would have to decide whether he could build something more difficult. A relationship, a father. Annie insisted on showing him every drawing she had made that week. There were rockets and houses and a dog that looked suspiciously like a loaf of bread with legs. Daniel sat cross-legged on the rug beside her, his overcoat folded carefully over the back of a dining chair Monica had offered him earlier. The apartment was small but orderly. A beige couch against one wall, a second-hand coffee table with faint scratches across the surface, a bookshelf crowded with children's paperbacks, a Bible tucked between them. The smell of chicken soup drifted from the kitchen, ordinary, grounded. Nothing about it resembled the world Daniel had spent the last decade constructing. "Do you work in a tall building?" Annie asked suddenly, still coloring. "Yes," he answered. "Like, really tall?" "Pretty tall." She considered that. "Do you ever get scared up there?" The question was innocent, curious. "Not of the height," he said. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Monica watched them from the kitchen doorway, arms folded loosely, expression unreadable but not hostile. After a few more minutes, she spoke gently. "Annie, Why don't you wash your hands for dinner? Okay, Annie replied, hopping up and disappearing down the short hallway. The apartment grew quieter. Daniel stood slowly. Monica moved to the small table and set down 3 bowls. You don't have to stay, she said. I'd like to. She studied him briefly, then nodded once. They sat across from each other while Annie chattered about school spelling tests and a classmate who refused to share crayons. Daniel listened carefully, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to remember every detail. After dinner, Annie yawned dramatically. Bedtime, Monica said. Can Daniel come say goodnight? Monica hesitated only briefly. All right. Annie climbed into her small bed, rocket ship blanket pulled up to her chin. Daniel stood awkwardly at the doorway. Good night, Annie, he said softly. Good night, she replied. Will you fix more things tomorrow? The question was light, but it landed with unexpected weight. I'll try, he said. She smiled and closed her eyes. Monica stepped into the hallway and gently shut the bedroom door. They stood facing each other in the dim light of the living room. She doesn't know yet, Monica said quietly. I understand. I didn't plan to tell her this way. There isn't a simple way, he admitted. Monica leaned against the counter. So, she said, steady but direct. What happens now? Daniel inhaled slowly. I want to be present. In what way? As her father. The word sounded fragile and enormous all at once. Monica held his gaze. Being a father isn't a title, she said. It's consistency. I know. Do you? He didn't answer immediately. I didn't grow up with consistency, he said at last. Her expression softened slightly. My father provided everything, he continued. Except time. Monica considered that. And you think you can do better? I want to. That's not the same as can. He accepted the correction. I'll rearrange my schedule. She almost smiled at that. You can't schedule fatherhood between meetings. He exhaled quietly. I know that too. Silence stretched between them. You understand this changes things, she said. Yes. If you're involved, it won't stay quiet forever. I'm aware. And your father? Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He's aware too. Monica nodded, as if she'd expected that. I don't want Annie dragged into corporate battles, she said firmly. No press. No speculation. She won't be. You can't promise that. I can promise I won't hide her. The words hung in the air. Monica studied him carefully. There's a difference between protecting someone and concealing them, she said. I'm learning that. She moved to the sink, rinsing dishes slowly. You can start small, she said over her shoulder. Pick her up from school once a week. Take her for ice cream. Be reliable. He nodded. I can do that. Then do it. There was no ceremony in the agreement, no dramatic handshake, just a quiet understanding forming in a modest kitchen on the south side of Chicago. Daniel glanced toward Annie's closed bedroom door. I don't want to confuse her, he said. You will, Monica replied gently. At first, he almost smiled at the honesty. But confusion isn't the worst thing, she continued. Disappointment is. The words settled heavily. I won't disappear, he said. Monica met his eyes. Then don't. He put his coat back on slowly. At the door, he paused. Thank you, he said. For what? For giving me the chance. She held his gaze. This isn't a favor, she said quietly. It's her right, he nodded. Outside, the air felt colder than when he arrived, but something inside him felt clearer, not lighter, clearer. He walked to his car without looking back, this time not out of indifference, but because he knew he would return. Tomorrow, there would be consequences, boardrooms, conversations, strategy. But tonight, he carried something different home with him. Not uncertainty, not fear, responsibility. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Whitmore understood that responsibility was not a burden placed upon him by investors or inheritance. It was a promise, one he intended to keep. The shift began quietly. On Monday morning, Daniel arrived at Whitmore Technologies earlier than usual. The lobby staff greeted him with their customary professionalism, but there was something slightly altered in the air, subtle, almost imperceptible. News had not broken. No headlines screamed across financial networks. Yet information had a way of moving through invisible channels long before it became public. He stepped into the executive elevator alone. The mirrored walls reflected a man who looked the same as he had a week ago: tailored suit, composed expression, steady posture. But he no longer felt like the same man. Inside the boardroom, The quarterly expansion strategy was already displayed across a wide screen. Senior executives sat in their usual places. His father occupied the seat at the far end of the table, hands folded, gaze unreadable. Daniel took his chair. "We'll begin," Thomas said, his tone crisp. The presentation started. Market forecasts, regional growth, international licensing agreements. Daniel listened, contributed where necessary, but his focus carried a new undercurrent. Every decision now felt connected to something larger than valuation. Midway through the meeting, Thomas cleared his throat. "There is an additional matter," he said. The room quieted. "We have received inquiries," Thomas continued evenly, "regarding a potential personal situation involving our CEO." A few heads turned subtly toward Daniel. He did not shift. "Inquiries from whom?" the CFO asked carefully. "Freelance reporters," Thomas replied. "Nothing formal, yet." Daniel spoke before anyone else could. "It's true," he said calmly. The word landed heavier than he intended. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. "There is a child," Daniel continued, voice steady. "A 6-year-old girl. She is my daughter." Silence, the kind that absorbs sound rather than reflects it. The CFO blinked once. "Is this recent information?" someone asked. "Yes," Daniel answered. "It was confirmed this week." Thomas leaned forward. "And how do you intend to manage this?" he asked, though the question felt more like a challenge than curiosity. "By acknowledging it," Daniel replied. "Privately, first. Publicly, if necessary." "You understand the market sensitivity," Thomas said. "Questions of judgment. Timing." "I do." "And you still intend to proceed?" "Yes." Another silence. One board member, a woman in her late 50s who had served for over a decade, spoke carefully. "Is there risk of litigation?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "There will be no legal disputes." "Financial claims?" Daniel shook his head. "She is not making claims." Thomas's jaw tightened slightly. "And yet," he said, "perception alone can move stock." Daniel met his father's gaze across the table. "Then we lead with transparency." Thomas did not respond immediately. The board member who had spoken earlier leaned back in her chair. "With respect," she said slowly, "the optics of acknowledging responsibility may be stronger than denying it." Thomas glanced at her sharply, but she continued. "Markets dislike scandal," she said. "They respect integrity." Daniel absorbed that quietly. Thomas straightened. "We will not release any statement unless forced," he said. Daniel did not argue, but he did not agree either. After the meeting, conversations broke into smaller clusters. Quiet exchanges. Controlled curiosity. Daniel returned to his office. Within an hour, his phone buzzed. "Monica," he answered immediately. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "But Annie's school called." His pulse quickened. "Why?" "Someone asked about you." He closed his eyes briefly. "A reporter?" "Possibly." Daniel moved toward the window. "I'm sorry," he said. "She doesn't know," Monica assured him. "But the principal wanted to confirm whether Annie's father was involved in any public matter." "And what did you say?" "I said Annie's father is learning to be present." The phrasing struck him. "And they accepted that?" he asked. For now, silence lingered between them. "I'll handle it," he said. "Handle it how?" He considered his answer carefully. "With a statement," he replied. "On my terms." Monica exhaled slowly. "That will make it real." "It already is." He ended the call and dialed his communications director. "I need a press briefing scheduled," he said. "Regarding what?" she asked cautiously. "My daughter." A pause. "Sir, you heard me." He gave clear instructions. No evasions. No half-truths. By late afternoon, the announcement had been prepared. A brief, direct statement. Daniel Whitmore had recently learned he is the father of a 6-year-old girl. He intends to take full responsibility in his personal capacity while continuing to serve as CEO. Nothing defensive. Nothing apologetic. Just fact. When Thomas received a copy, he entered Daniel's office again without knocking. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said sharply. "No," Daniel replied calmly. "I'm preventing it from becoming something worse. You could have protected the company. I am protecting it." Thomas stared at him. "You think this makes you strong?" "I think hiding her would make me weak." The air between them felt charged but contained. You're risking everything, Thomas said. Daniel shook his head. I'm choosing everything. His father did not respond. That evening, news outlets picked up the statement. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't scandalous. But it was clear. Daniel drove south again. Monica opened the door before he knocked. They saw it on TV, she said quietly. And she asked what it meant. Daniel stepped inside. Annie stood in the living room holding her rocket drawing. Mom says you're my dad, she said plainly. No fear, no accusation, just curiosity. Daniel knelt slowly in front of her. Yes, he said. She studied him carefully. Does that mean you're staying? The question was soft, but it held everything. Yes, he answered. And for the first time, the word felt less like a promise and more like a decision. The next morning, Annie woke up famous. Not the kind of famous that comes with red carpets or flashing cameras outside the door, but the quieter, more confusing kind. The kind that travels through adult whispers, sideways glances, and teachers speaking a little too gently. Monica had insisted Annie stay home from school for the day. Just until things settle, she'd said. Daniel arrived just after 9 with a box of donuts from a bakery 2 blocks away. Not expensive, not extravagant. Powdered sugar and chocolate glaze in a plain white box. He knocked softly. Annie opened the door before Monica could. You came back, she said, as though she'd half expected him not to. I said I would, Daniel replied. That seemed to satisfy her. Inside, the television was off. Monica stood near the kitchen counter, arms crossed, not defensive, just steady. There's a news van down the street, she said quietly. Daniel exhaled through his nose. I figured there might be. You said it would be controlled. It is, he answered. Controlled doesn't mean invisible. Annie tugged at his sleeve. Mom says people know you're my dad. He knelt to her level again. Yes. Is that bad? No. She studied his face carefully. Are they mad? Some people might talk, he said gently. But talking isn't the same as being mad. She considered that seriously. Are you mad? He shook his head. No. She seemed satisfied and reached into the donut box. Monica watched the exchange carefully. She asked if she did something wrong. Monica said quietly once Annie moved toward the couch. Daniel felt the weight of that immediately. She didn't. I told her that. Thank you. A knock at the door interrupted them. All three froze. Daniel stood slowly. I'll handle it, he said. Monica hesitated, then nodded. He opened the door only a few inches. A man in a dark jacket stood there, holding a microphone with a small network logo. Mr. Whitmore, the reporter said quickly. Would you care to comment further on? No, Daniel interrupted calmly. My statement stands. Is it true you concealed this child for 6 years? The question came sharp and eager. Daniel's expression did not change. No, he said evenly. It's true I learned about her recently. Is the mother seeking financial compensation? No. Will this impact your leadership? Daniel held the reporter's gaze. My leadership is defined by accountability, he said. That includes my personal life. The reporter attempted another question, but Daniel closed the door gently but firmly. Inside, Annie looked up from the couch. Was that a salesman? Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Something like that. Monica shook her head softly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I won't let them near her, Daniel said. You can't control everything. No, he admitted, but I can control access. His phone vibrated. Board members, investors, unknown numbers. He silenced it. I need to do something, he said. What? He looked around the apartment at the narrow hallway, the single entrance, the windows facing the street. You can't live like this under a spotlight. Monica stiffened slightly. We live just fine. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? I mean security, privacy, protection. We don't need bodyguards. You need distance. She crossed her arms. From what? The truth? From intrusion, he corrected. Annie wandered back toward them, donut in hand. Are we going to the park today? She asked. Monica hesitated. Daniel looked at her. Yes, he said gently. We are. Monica's eyebrows lifted slightly. Are we? Yes. Annie grinned. Daniel turned back to Monica. If we hide, he said quietly, they win the narrative. And if we walk into it, then we define it. She studied him carefully. You're used to control. I'm used to responsibility. There was a difference now. Annie grabbed her small jacket. Come on, she said impatiently. Monica sighed but retrieved her coat. They stepped outside together. The news van remained at the corner, but the crew seemed caught off guard by their movement. Daniel did not hurry. He walked beside Annie, not in front of her, not shielding her dramatically. Beside her, the cameras lifted, microphones raised. Annie looked up at him. "Why are they holding sticks?" she whispered. "They're asking questions." He murmured. "About me?" "About us." She squeezed his hand without thinking. The gesture startled him more than the cameras. At the edge of the park, he turned toward the reporters. "I will answer one question," he said calmly. The noise quieted slightly. "Why now?" someone called out. Daniel glanced down at Annie before responding. "Because truth doesn't run on a schedule," he said, "and neither does being a father." He did not elaborate. He did not posture. He simply continued walking. The reporters did not follow them into the park. Perhaps the image was already enough. Inside the park, the ordinary rhythm of life continued. Joggers passed. A woman walked her dog. Children played near the swings. Annie climbed onto her tricycle again. "Race you!" she shouted. Daniel jogged lightly beside her. For the first time since the announcement, something inside him felt steady, not because the cameras were gone, but because he was exactly where he had chosen to stand. Monica walked a few paces behind, watching both of them. When Annie stopped near the same bench from days before, she looked at Daniel seriously. "Are you going to disappear?" The question was direct, honest. He crouched in front of her. "No," he said. "How long?" "As long as you'll have me." She seemed to think that over carefully. "Okay," she decided. And in that small agreement, beneath open sky and lingering camera lenses in the distance, Daniel Whitmore understood something with absolute clarity. The real test would not be headlines. It would be consistency. By the end of the week, the headlines had shifted tone. What began as speculative curiosity softened into measured commentary. Financial analysts debated whether Daniel Whitmore's public acknowledgement of his daughter signaled instability or strength. Morning talk shows framed it as a story about responsibility. Opinion columns split neatly down ideological lines. But in the small apartment on the south side, the discussion was far less dramatic. "Dad," Annie said carefully that Saturday morning, testing the word for the first time without prompting. Daniel looked up from the small wooden table where he was helping her assemble a cardboard solar system for a school project. "Yes." She paused, studying his reaction. Nothing changed in his expression except warmth. "Can you cut the ring for Saturn better than Mom?" Monica, standing at the stove, arched an eyebrow. "We'll see," Daniel replied. Annie grinned and handed him the scissors. The word Dad echoed quietly in his chest. It didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like trust. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to his condominium to retrieve a few things, clothes he might need if he planned to spend more evenings at Monica's apartment, files he wanted to review privately. The building's doorman greeted him with respectful normalcy, but Daniel sensed the subtle curiosity in the air. News had reached every corner of his professional world. Inside his unit, silence greeted him. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture arranged with deliberate minimalism. Everything was curated. Everything was controlled. He walked into the guest room unused, immaculate. He imagined a small bed there, color on the walls, crayon marks on the coffee table. The image felt foreign and oddly necessary. His phone buzzed. "Thomas Whitmore," Daniel answered. "I assume you've seen the coverage," Thomas said without greeting. "Yes, the board is divided. I expected that. Some believe your statement stabilized the situation," Thomas admitted reluctantly. "And you?" A pause. "I believe you've introduced unpredictability." Daniel walked toward the window, looking down at the river below. "Life is unpredictable," he said calmly. "Business should not be. I'm not stepping down. I didn't say you were, but the implication lingered. You've shifted perception," Thomas continued. "Investors now view you as human." Daniel almost smiled. "That's not a weakness." "It can be. For you," Daniel replied gently. "Maybe." Silence stretched between them. "I won't interfere further," Thomas said at last. "But understand this, if complications arise, you will face them alone." Daniel absorbed that without flinching. "I already am." After the call ended, Daniel remained at the window for several minutes. Alone, but not the way he had been before. That evening, he returned south. Annie was waiting at the window when his car pulled up. "He's here!" she shouted. Daniel stepped out before she could run outside unsupervised. Monica opened the door. "She's been asking what fathers do," Monica said quietly. "And I told her they show up." Daniel nodded. Annie tugged his hand immediately. "Come see. I made something." On the coffee table sat the cardboard solar system, now painted in bright, imperfect colors. "This is Earth," she said, pointing. "And this is Saturn. You cut it better." Daniel crouched beside her. "It's perfect," he said. "It's not perfect," she corrected seriously. "But it's mine." He glanced at Monica. The lesson wasn't subtle. Later, after Annie had gone to bed, Monica poured 2 cups of tea instead of coffee. "You're adjusting quickly," she observed. "I'm trying. There will be harder days. I know. Parent-teacher meetings, school plays, questions." He nodded slowly. "I'll be there. You can't promise attendance without understanding sacrifice." He met her gaze. "I've built a life on sacrifice. For ambition," she said quietly. He didn't argue. "That won't work here," she added. He let that settle. "No," he admitted. "It won't." Outside, a siren wailed briefly before fading into distance. Inside, the apartment felt grounded. Monica studied him across the small kitchen table. "Why now?" she asked softly. He understood the question wasn't about timing. "It's not about now," he said. "It's about not repeating what I grew up with." Her expression shifted slightly. "You're not your father." "I don't want to be." She nodded once. "That's a start." Silence followed, not tense, but reflective. "Annie asked me something earlier," Monica added. "What?" "She asked if she gets to visit your tall building." Daniel considered that. "Yes," he said. "She does, but not as a spectacle." "Not as a spectacle," he agreed. He stood to leave shortly after. At the door, Monica paused him. "You understand this isn't redemption," she said. "I know. It's responsibility." He nodded. "And responsibility," she continued, "is daily." "Then I'll show up daily." As he walked back toward his car, Daniel felt the quiet weight of that commitment. In boardrooms, responsibility was negotiated. In families, it was lived. Tomorrow would bring new questions, new pressure, new scrutiny. But tonight, he carried something steadier than public approval. He carried direction, and for the first time in his life, that direction was not upward. It was inward. The first crack did not come from the media. It came from inside the company. Daniel noticed it in the way conversations paused when he entered a room, in the way 2 senior executives stopped mid-sentence near the elevators, in the polite but distant tone of a board member who had once treated him like an equal partner rather than a calculated risk. Monday morning, he arrived to find a private memo waiting in his inbox. Subject: Governance Review Discussion. He read it once, then again. The board wanted to evaluate leadership stability in light of recent developments. He almost smiled at the phrasing. Leadership stability. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Annie had asked him the night before if Saturn's rings ever fell off. He had told her no. He hoped he hadn't lied. At noon, the board convened an executive session. Thomas Whitmore sat at the head of the table as usual, posture sharp, expression unreadable. Daniel took his seat without hesitation. "We need to address perception risk," one director began carefully. "Perception of what?" Daniel asked calmly. "Distraction, vulnerability, emotional influence." Daniel folded his hands in front of him. "I acknowledged my daughter," he said evenly. "I did not abdicate responsibility." "This isn't personal," another board member added. "It's fiduciary." "It's always personal," Daniel replied quietly. "You just prefer to label it otherwise." Thomas cleared his throat. "The issue," he said, "is predictability." Daniel met his father's gaze. "You built this company on calculated control," Thomas continued. "Investors trust control, and they distrust secrets," Daniel answered. A pause. One of the older directors, the same woman who had spoken in his favor before, leaned forward. "Has your performance suffered?" she asked directly. "No." "Has revenue declined beyond standard fluctuation?" "No." "Have you failed in any executive function?" "No." She leaned back. "Then this is not about performance," she concluded. "It's about discomfort." The room quieted. Thomas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Markets respond to narrative," he insisted. "And the narrative," Daniel said, is that I took responsibility, and you think that inspires confidence? Yes. Silence stretched. Thomas shifted tactics. There is another concern, he said. Inheritance. Daniel's expression remained still. You have no previous heirs, Thomas continued. The introduction of one alters long-term structural planning. The word structure again. She is 6, Daniel said evenly. Not a hostile takeover. A few restrained smiles flickered around the table. Thomas did not smile. We will not destabilize governance for sentiment, he said firmly. I'm not asking you to, Daniel replied, but I will not sign anything that excludes her from my life. The words hung heavier than expected. One director cleared his throat. No one is asking that. Thomas didn't respond, but the implication lingered. After 2 hours of debate, the meeting adjourned without formal action. Temporary calm. Daniel returned to his office and closed the door. He stood by the window again, staring down at the river's steady current. His phone buzzed. Monica, he answered immediately. Hey, Annie had a rough afternoon, Monica said softly. His chest tightened. What happened? Another child said she was on TV because she did something bad. Daniel closed his eyes. And? She asked me if that was true. The silence between them felt heavier than any boardroom argument. What did you tell her? He asked quietly. I told her sometimes adults misunderstand things, Monica said. But that being seen isn't the same as being wrong. Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. I know, Monica replied gently. But sorry doesn't fix playground conversations. I'll come by. She's doing homework. Come after 7. He nodded even though she couldn't see it. Okay. When he arrived that evening, Annie sat at the table with a worksheet in front of her. She looked up. Dad? The word still surprised him. Yes. Did I do something bad? He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her. No, he said firmly. Then why were we on TV? He chose his words carefully. Because sometimes when grown-ups fix old mistakes, other grown-ups talk about it. She frowned slightly. You made a mistake? Yes. She studied him seriously. Did you say sorry? Yes. She nodded once, satisfied with that logic. Okay. Monica watched quietly from the kitchen doorway. After Annie went to bed, Daniel remained seated at the table. They're questioning my leadership, he said. Are they right to? He looked up. No. Then stand, Monica replied simply. He almost smiled. You make it sound easy. It isn't, she said. But Annie doesn't care about stock prices. He leaned back. They're worried about inheritance. Monica's expression shifted slightly. I don't want anything from you, she said immediately. I know. I didn't raise her for that. I know. Silence settled between them. You don't owe me, she added quietly. He met her Gaza. This isn't about owing, he said. It's about belonging. She considered that. Belonging is earned, she replied. I'm working on it. Outside, wind brushed softly against the apartment windows. Inside, the space felt steady in a way his glass tower never had. When Daniel left that night, he didn't feel defeated. He felt tested. And tests, he understood better than most, reveal structure. Tomorrow, the board might escalate. His father might press harder. The market might shift. But Annie would wake up asking about Saturn's rings and spelling quizzes. And that, Daniel realized, was the axis that mattered now. By Thursday, the pressure stopped being subtle. It became procedural. Daniel was called into a special governance session at 8 a.m., earlier than usual, before most of the executive team had even arrived. The sky outside the tower was still gray, Chicago wrapped in a cold mist rising off the river. He entered the boardroom knowing this would not be routine. Thomas Whitmore stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. 3 other directors were already seated, folders neatly arranged in front of them. No small talk, no coffee, just structure. Let's begin, Thomas said. Daniel took his seat. A legal advisor, external counsel, sat at the far end of the table. That was new. We've conducted a rapid risk assessment, one director began. There is no immediate financial collapse forecast. However, volatility has increased. Daniel listened without interruption. We are proposing a temporary oversight structure, Thomas continued. A co-signature requirement on major decisions until stability returns. Daniel understood what that meant. Alish, you're questioning my judgment, he said calmly. We're reinforcing governance, Thomas replied. Daniel folded his hands. Because I acknowledged my daughter? Because emotion alters executive calculus, Thomas said. And you assume I am compromised. You are involved. Daniel leaned back slightly. Involved is not the same as compromised. Silence. The legal advisor slid a document across the table. Standard precautionary measure, he said. Temporary. Daniel didn't look at it immediately. Instead, he asked, would this have been proposed if I'd concealed her? No one answered. That was answer enough. Thomas spoke carefully. You introduced unpredictability. Daniel nodded once. Yes, he said. The admission startled them. But unpredictability is not incompetence, he continued. It's honesty. The older female director watched him closely. You're asking us to trust you, she said. No, Daniel replied quietly. I'm asking you to judge me by performance, not fear. Thomas stepped forward. You are risking legacy, he said. Daniel met his father's gaze directly. I am redefining it. The air felt heavy with unspoken history. Thomas's voice lowered. You think fatherhood strengthens you. I know hiding it would weaken me. Another silence. Finally, Daniel reached for the document. He read it carefully. Temporary co-authorization on acquisitions above a certain threshold. Review on capital expansion. No removal of title, but visible restraint. He placed the document back on the table. I will not sign this, he said calmly. The words did not echo, but they shifted everything. Thomas's eyes hardened. You leave us little choice. There is always choice. You would gamble the company? No, Daniel said evenly. But I will not teach my daughter that integrity requires surrender. The room went still. The older director spoke again. Perhaps we table this, she suggested. Monitor for 30 days. Thomas looked at her sharply, but she held his gaze. Stability is not restored by panic, she added. Reluctantly, Thomas stepped back. 30 days, he said. The meeting adjourned without signatures. But the line had been drawn. Daniel returned to his office and closed the door quietly. For a moment, he allowed himself to sit in silence. Not defeat, not victory, just clarity. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Mr. Whitmore, a woman's voice said. I'm calling from Annie's school. His spine straightened. Yes, there's nothing alarming, she reassured him quickly. But we've had a few parents express concerns. Concerns about what? Media attention. They're worried about disruption. Daniel inhaled slowly. Is Annie being treated differently? A few comments, the principal admitted. Children repeat what they hear. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I'll come down, he said. That may not be necessary. It is, he replied gently. Within the hour, he was standing in the principal's office. The building smelled faintly of crayons and disinfectant. Annie sat in a small chair outside, coloring quietly. She looked up when she saw him. Dad? He crouched beside her. Hey, am I in trouble? No. She studied his face. You don't look mad. I'm not. Inside the office, the principal spoke carefully. We support Annie, she said. But media presence around the neighborhood has made some families uncomfortable. I understand, Daniel replied. What do you need from me? Reassurance, she said honestly. That this won't escalate. He nodded. It won't. He meant it. Afterward, he walked Annie out of school early. They stopped for hot chocolate at a small diner nearby. She swung her legs beneath the booth seat. Do you get in trouble at your work? She asked suddenly. Sometimes, he admitted. Because of me? He leaned forward slightly. Never because of you. She seemed to weigh that carefully. Then why? Because some people don't like change. She nodded thoughtfully. I don't like broccoli, she said. He smiled faintly. That's different. Is it? He paused. Maybe not. As they left the diner, Annie slipped her small hand into his without hesitation. The gesture was instinctive, unforced, and as Daniel walked her back to Monica's apartment, cameras nowhere in sight, he understood something that the boardroom could not quantify. Strength was not in control. It was in consistency under pressure. That evening, when Monica opened the door, she searched his face. They tried to limit my authority, he said quietly. And I said no. She studied him. That will cost you. Yes. Are you afraid? He considered the question honestly. Of losing the company? He asked. She nodded. He looked down at Annie, who was already running toward her room to retrieve another drawing. No, he said. And for the first time, the answer felt entirely true. The fracture came quietly, but this time, it did not come from the board. It came from Thomas Whitmore himself. 3 days after the governance session, Daniel was summoned not to the tower but to the North Shore estate. The house had not changed. Long driveway lined with trimmed hedges. White columns rising against the lakefront sky. Windows polished to perfection. It stood like a monument to permanence. Daniel had not spent more than a handful of nights here in the last decade. He parked at the base of the circular drive and stepped out without waiting for the house staff to greet him. Inside, the marble floors echoed faintly beneath his steps. Thomas waited in the study. The room smelled faintly of leather and old paper. Framed photographs lined the walls, business awards, ribbon cuttings, charity galas. Daniel's childhood was represented in only 2 small frames near the bookshelf. "Sit," Thomas said. Daniel remained standing. "I prefer to stand." Thomas nodded once. "As you wish." There was no preamble. "I've drafted an amendment to the family trust," Thomas began. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "I assumed you might." Thomas slid a folder across the desk. "If you insist on public integration," he said evenly. "This ensures clarity." Daniel did not open it immediately. "What kind of clarity?" "Annie will not automatically inherit controlling interest in Whitmore Technologies." Daniel looked up sharply. "She's 6. She is a factor. She is my daughter, and you are CEO of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise," Thomas countered. Daniel opened the folder. Legal language, structured protections, contingency clauses, inheritance distributed through controlled vehicles, board oversight, conditional triggers. "She will be provided for," Thomas said, generously. "She's not a beneficiary line item," Daniel replied quietly. Thomas's tone remained calm. "This is not emotional. It's structural." Daniel closed the folder slowly. "You built this entire life around structure," he said. "But you never built space for people." Thomas's eyes sharpened. "People complicate structure. People are the point." A silence heavier than previous ones settled between them. "You think you're correcting my mistakes," Thomas said. "I'm preventing mine." Thomas stepped around the desk. "You are letting sentiment override discipline." "No," Daniel said steadily. "I'm letting responsibility override fear." Thomas's voice lowered. "You were never denied anything." Daniel almost laughed, but didn't. "I was denied time." The words surprised even him. Thomas blinked once, caught off guard. "You confuse presence with provision," Daniel continued. "They are not the same." Thomas's expression hardened again. "You built your company on the foundation I laid, and I'm grateful," Daniel replied. "But Annie will not grow up measuring love in dividends." The air seemed to tighten. Thomas looked toward the lake beyond the window. "You believe this makes you strong," he said quietly. "I believe hiding her would make me weak." Thomas turned back. "If you refuse the amendment, you force my hand." Daniel held his gaze. "And what does that mean?" "It means succession planning moves forward sooner than anticipated." The threat was subtle but clear. A board vote, an early transition. Daniel did not flinch. "If you believe I am unfit," he said calmly, "then call the vote." Thomas studied him carefully. "You would walk away?" "If the cost of staying is denying her legitimacy, yes." The answer hung in the room like a line drawn in permanent ink. Thomas's posture shifted slightly, not softer, but less rigid. "You're willing to risk everything." "No," Daniel replied quietly. "I'm unwilling to risk her." A long silence followed. For a moment, father and son stood not as executives but as 2 men shaped by different definitions of strength. Thomas returned to his desk slowly. "Take the document," he said at last. "Review it." Daniel did not move. "I won't sign anything that diminishes her." "You may not have that luxury." Daniel stepped closer to the desk. "She will not be hidden in a trust designed to minimize her existence." Thomas exhaled slowly. "You're emotional." "Yes," Daniel said. "I am." The admission stunned the room. "And I am still competent." Thomas stared at him. "I built you to withstand pressure, and I do," Daniel replied. "Just not by becoming you." The words were not shouted, but they were final. Daniel turned toward the door. 30 days, Thomas said quietly behind him. Daniel paused. "The board will evaluate you in 30 days. Daniel nodded once without turning. "I'll give them no reason to doubt me. And if they do," Daniel opened the study door. "Then I'll leave with my integrity intact." He stepped into the hallway, the house echoing faintly around him. Outside, The lake stretched wide and gray under a low sky. For years, this estate had represented origin, power, expectation, legacy. Now it felt like something else. A test. As Daniel drove away, his phone buzzed. "Monica," he answered immediately. "Everything all right?" "Annie has a school presentation tomorrow," Monica said. "About family." He closed his eyes briefly. "Of course she does. She wants you there." There was no hesitation this time. "I'll be there." He ended the call and looked back once at the estate shrinking in his rearview mirror. Legacy had once meant control. Now it meant something different. Showing up, even if it cost him everything built before. The real vote, he realized, wasn't happening in the boardroom. It was happening in a second-grade classroom tomorrow morning, and that was the one that mattered most. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early. The elementary school parking lot was already half-full sedans, minivans, a few pickup trucks dusted with early frost. The building itself was modest. Red brick, with a flagpole standing tall out front. Children's artwork lined the interior hallway windows, bright paper suns and crooked rainbows taped carefully in uneven rows. He adjusted his coat before stepping inside. No cameras, no reporters, just parents. Inside the classroom, small desks were arranged in a semicircle. A poster on the whiteboard read, "Family Presentation Day." Construction paper hearts were taped beneath it. Annie stood near her desk, holding a trifold poster board almost as big as she was. Crayon drawings covered it her, Monica, and a tall stick figure with carefully mismatched eyes colored in blue and brown. When she saw him in the doorway, her face lit up. "You came." "I said I would," he answered. Several parents glanced up. Recognition flickered across a few faces, but there were no whispers, no hostility, just curiosity. Monica stood near the back wall, arms loosely folded. She gave Daniel a small nod. The teacher, Miss Alvarez, approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Whitmore," she said softly, "thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me." He took a seat in one of the small plastic chairs along the wall. His knees rose higher than usual in the child-sized space, but he didn't adjust. One by one, children stood and presented. "My family likes camping. My dad works with trucks. My grandma makes the best pancakes." Annie's turn came halfway through. She walked to the front, poster trembling slightly in her hands, not from fear, but from effort. "This is my family," she began. Daniel felt his chest tighten. "That's my mom." Annie continued proudly, pointing to the drawing of Monica. "She makes soup when I'm sick and reads stories even when she's tired." A few parents smiled. "And this," Annie said, pointing to the taller figure, "is my dad." The word hung clearly in the room. Daniel did not move. "He fixes things," she said. "And he works in a tall building." And he came back. The simplicity of that statement carried more weight than any corporate declaration he had ever made. "And he has 2 different colored eyes like me," she added matter-of-factly. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the room. "He says broken things can be fixed," Annie finished. Silence followed, not uncomfortable, but reflective. Miss Alvarez smiled. "Thank you, Annie. That was beautiful." Annie beamed and returned to her seat. Daniel felt something settle inside him, not pride in the public sense, but something steadier. Belonging. After the presentations ended, parents mingled casually near the door. A man in a work jacket approached Daniel cautiously. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, not unkindly. "I wouldn't miss it," Daniel replied. The man nodded once. "Good," he said. "Kids notice when you do. No judgment, just truth." Another parent, a woman holding a toddler on her hip, added quietly, "My daughter asked if Annie was in trouble. I told her no. I told her families look different." Daniel nodded gratefully. "Thank you." When the classroom began to empty, Annie ran toward him. "Did I do good?" He crouched in front of her. "You did better than good." She studied his face carefully. "You didn't leave?" "No." She wrapped her small arms around his neck without hesitation. In that moment, there was no board, no inheritance clause, no governance review, just a father holding his daughter in a classroom filled with paper hearts. Monica approached quietly. "She was nervous," she said softly. "She didn't show it. She gets that from me." Daniel smiled faintly. "And maybe a little from me." They walked out together. Outside, the morning sun had broken through the clouds, casting long light across the parking lot. As they reached Monica's car, Daniel's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Board chair, emergency meeting request. He silenced it without answering. Monica noticed. You should take it, she said. I will, he replied. After. After what? He looked down at Annie, who was swinging her poster board like a flag. After ice cream. Monica's eyebrow lifted slightly. It's 10 in the morning. It's a special day. Annie gasped. Really? Yes, Daniel said. They walked to a nearby diner instead. The kind that served milkshakes before noon without question. Annie ordered chocolate. Monica chose coffee. Daniel ordered vanilla, though he rarely ate sweets. As Annie talked animatedly about the other presentations, Daniel's phone vibrated twice more. He ignored it. Finally, Monica reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. They won't wait forever, she said. I know. And if they vote? He held her gaze steadily. Then they vote. She studied him carefully. You're calm. I'm certain. About what? He glanced at Annie, who was now licking chocolate from her spoon with fierce concentration. About what matters. Monica exhaled slowly. Legacy isn't just ownership, she said quietly. No, Daniel agreed. It's example. Annie looked up suddenly. What's legacy? Daniel thought for a moment. It's what people remember about how you treated them. She nodded seriously. Then I want mine to be nice. He smiled. That's a good start. As they finished their milkshakes, Daniel checked his phone. The emergency meeting was set for 4 o'clock. He would attend. He would face whatever vote waited. But as he walked Annie back to the car, her hand tucked securely in his, he understood something with clarity that no shareholder report could redefine. If he lost the company today, he would still have kept his word, and that was a legacy he could live with. At 3:58 p.m., Daniel entered the boardroom alone. No assistant, no folder in hand, no prepared statement. The skyline behind the glass walls glowed in late afternoon light, casting long shadows across the polished table. Every seat was filled. Even directors who typically joined remotely were present in person. Thomas Whitmore sat at the head, hands folded, expression unreadable. Daniel took his seat. We'll come to order, Thomas said. There was no hostility in his tone, only procedure. You are aware, Thomas continued, that several board members have requested a formal vote regarding executive leadership stability. I am, Daniel replied calmly. This is not a termination motion, one director clarified. It is a confidence review. Daniel nodded. I understand. The older female director leaned forward slightly. Before we proceed, she said, I would like Mr. Whitmore to address the board. Thomas's eyes flickered briefly, but he did not object. Daniel stood. For a moment, he simply looked at the faces around the table, people who had invested in him, questioned him, benefited from him. I won't offer theatrics, he began evenly. You've read the reports. You've seen the numbers. He paused. Our revenue remains stable. Our projections remain strong. Our leadership team remains intact. He let that settle. The concern is not performance, he continued. It is perception. Several heads shifted subtly. I acknowledged my daughter publicly, he said. Not because it was convenient, because it was correct. Thomas remained still. For years, Daniel went on, this company has marketed itself on accountability, transparency, responsibility. He allowed the words to echo softly. I chose to apply those principles to my personal life. A brief silence. If that is interpreted as instability, he said, then we need to revisit what we define as strength. One director cleared his throat. The market fears distraction, he said carefully. I am not distracted, Daniel replied. I am grounded. Thomas spoke then. And if further complications arise, he asked. Daniel met his father's gaze. Then I will address them directly, as I have addressed every challenge this company has faced. Another pause. I will not hide my daughter, Daniel added quietly. If that position costs me this office, I accept that. The room went very still. He did not sit down. He did not soften the statement. He simply allowed it to stand. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Very well, he said. We will proceed to vote. Ballots were distributed. Paper. Simple. The quiet scratch of pens filled the room. Daniel remained standing. He did not attempt to read expressions. He did not attempt to calculate odds. For the first time in his career, outcome felt secondary. The ballots were collected. The corporate secretary tallied them with deliberate care. Seconds stretched. Finally, she looked up. The motion to initiate leadership transition fails. A breath moved through the room, subtle but audible. Thomas did not react outwardly. The board of firms continued confidence in Mr. Whitmore as CEO, the secretary concluded. Daniel sat down slowly, not in triumph. In acknowledgement, Thomas folded his hands again. "This matter is closed," he said. But it wasn't. Not entirely. After the meeting adjourned, most directors left quietly. Only Thomas remained. The room felt larger without witnesses. "You forced their hand," Thomas said calmly. "I answered their doubt," Daniel replied. Thomas stepped closer. "You think this is victory? It's alignment. With sentiment. With principle." Thomas studied him carefully. "You are changing the company." "Yes. And if the market turns?" Daniel did not hesitate. "Then I adjust." Thomas's gaze sharpened. "You risk legacy for a child." Daniel held it. "I build legacy for her." Silence settled. Thomas turned toward the window, staring out at the river. "You were not weak," he said quietly. "As a boy." Daniel felt the shift in tone. "You were disciplined," Thomas continued. "Focused. I was afraid to disappoint you," Daniel replied. The honesty lingered in the air. Thomas did not answer immediately. After a moment, he said, "Disappointment is inefficient." Daniel almost smiled. "Children don't measure efficiency." Thomas glanced at him. "No," he admitted softly. "They don't." It was not reconciliation, but it was something. Daniel left the building before sunset. He drove south without stopping at his condominium. When he arrived at Monica's apartment, Annie was already outside, chalk drawing on the sidewalk. She looked up as his car pulled in. "You're early." "I finished work," he said. She ran toward him. "Did you win?" He crouched to her height. "Yes." She nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I told Mom you would." Monica stepped out onto the sidewalk, watching them carefully. "It's done?" she asked quietly. "It's done," he confirmed. For now." "For now," he agreed. Annie grabbed his hand and pulled him toward her chalk drawings. "Look," she said proudly. "That's you. And that's me. And that's Mom." The figures were uneven but unmistakable. 3 shapes standing side by side. Daniel studied it carefully. "It's perfect," he said. "It's not perfect," Annie corrected again. "But it's ours." He looked at Monica, and for the first time since the clinic call, he felt something settle fully into place. Not fear, not pressure, belonging. The board had voted. The company remained his to lead. But as Annie handed him a piece of chalk and insisted he draw beside them, Daniel understood something far more important than corporate survival. Leadership wasn't proven in glass towers. It was proven here, on sidewalks, in classrooms, in promises kept. The shift did not happen overnight. Victory in the boardroom did not silence doubt in the hallways. But something fundamental had changed. The following week, Daniel adjusted his calendar in a way that startled his executive assistant. "You're blocking Tuesdays at 3?" she asked, glancing at the screen. "Indefinitely?" "Yes." "For what should I list it?" He paused. "Personal commitment." She nodded, typing it in without question. At 2:55 p.m., that Tuesday, Daniel left the tower without fanfare. No press release, no driver escort, just a man walking to his car with purpose. By 3:18, he was standing outside Annie's school. A few parents recognized him. Some offered polite nods. No cameras. When the bell rang, Annie burst through the doors with a backpack nearly as large as she was. She scanned the crowd. When she saw him, she didn't wave. She ran. He knelt instinctively as she collided into his arms. "You said Tuesdays," she announced. "I did. You remembered." "Yes." She studied his face carefully, as though checking for cracks. "You're not busy." "I'm busy," he said honestly. "But I'm here." She seemed to accept the distinction. They walked to the car hand in hand. "Can we get ice cream again?" she asked. "It's 40 degrees," he replied. "So?" He smiled. "All right." Later that evening, as Annie worked on spelling words at the kitchen table, Monica watched Daniel from across the room. "You're rearranging your life," she observed quietly. "I'm integrating it," he replied. "There's a difference." "Yes," he admitted. "There is." Annie looked up. "How do you spell responsibility?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then spelled it slowly. She wrote it carefully on her worksheet. What does it mean? She continued. He glanced at Monica. It means you do what you say you'll do, he answered. Annie nodded seriously and returned to her paper. Monica's eyes held his. You're teaching her something, she said softly. I'm trying to learn it myself. Days turned into weeks. The media lost interest as quickly as it had ignited. Stock prices stabilized. Board meetings resumed their usual rhythm, less tension, more routine oversight. Thomas Whitmore remained distant, but he no longer pressed amendments. One Friday afternoon, Daniel invited Annie to visit the tower. Not for spectacle, not for display, for context. She stood in the lobby staring up at the ceiling. It's shiny, she whispered. Yes. Do you live here? No. Good, she said matter-of-factly. It feels echoey. He laughed softly. He showed her his office, no speeches, no introductions to executives. Just a desk, a chair, a view. She walked to the window and pressed her hands against the glass. It's high, she said. Are you scared? She shook her head. Are you? He considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted. She turned. Of falling? Of failing? She thought about that. Mom says falling teaches you balance. He smiled faintly. She's right. When they left the building, he felt something unexpected. Not pride in the structure, gratitude for the distance. That night, Annie insisted he stay for dinner. Macaroni and cheese from a box. Not gourmet. Not impressive. He ate every bite. After she went to bed, Monica sat across from him at the small kitchen table. You're not performing, she said quietly. No. No. You're not trying to impress her. No. Thanks for watching. Why? He thought for a moment. Because I don't want her to love me for the wrong reasons. Monica's gaze softened. She won't. I know. Silence settled gently between them. You're different here, she observed. Here, he replied. I'm not being evaluated. She tilted her head slightly. You're always being evaluated. He smiled faintly. Not by shareholders. She considered that. She watches everything, Monica added. She sees if you're late, if you're distracted, if you're honest. I know. And if you fail. He didn't hesitate this time. Then I apologize. Monica held his gaze. That matters. Outside, wind brushed against the apartment windows. Inside, something steadier had taken root. Not perfection, not redemption, consistency. As Daniel left that evening, Annie called out sleepily from her room. Don't forget Tuesday. I won't, he answered. Driving back toward downtown, he passed the North Shore exit without slowing. Legacy no longer felt like a monument to maintain. It felt like a pattern to repeat, week after week, choice after choice. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Whitmore understood that leadership was not measured by how high you built. It was measured by how firmly you stood beside the people who trusted you. Winter came quietly that year, not with a dramatic storm or citywide shutdown, but with a slow layering of frost along sidewalks and a sharper bite in the air that lingered after sunset. Chicago's skyline looked colder, harder. The river carried sheets of gray beneath thin morning light. Inside Whitmore Technologies, quarterly earnings exceeded projections. Inside a small South Side apartment, Annie lost her first tooth. Daniel was there when it happened. She had been biting into an apple at the kitchen table when she froze mid-chew. Something's wrong, she announced, eyes wide. Monica turned quickly. Did you hurt yourself? Annie held up the apple in one hand and a tiny white tooth in the other. Daniel stared for a second before laughing softly. That, he said, is not an emergency. Annie examined the tooth like a rare artifact. It fell out. That's what they do. Monica smiled. Annie looked up at Daniel. Does that mean I'm growing? Yes. Fast? Faster than I'm ready for, he admitted. She grinned. That night, Daniel helped tuck the tiny tooth into a folded tissue beneath her pillow. She insisted he double-check the placement. Will the tooth fairy know? She whispered. I suspect she has excellent navigation skills, he replied. Annie nodded, reassured. After she fell asleep, Daniel lingered in the hallway. You don't have to stay, Monica said quietly from the kitchen. I want to. She studied him for a moment. You've been here more than your condo lately. I noticed. And it doesn't feel temporary. The words hung in the air. Monica leaned against the counter. You're aware this isn't just about Annie anymore. He met her gaze steadily. I am. Outside, snow began to fall light, deliberate flakes drifting past the window. Inside, The apartment felt warmer than it ever had. The next morning, Annie woke up shrieking with delight. "There's money." Daniel pretended surprise. "Really? The tooth fairy must be generous." Annie ran to him, holding up the crisp bill like proof of magic. "You were right. I try to be." Later that day, Daniel attended another board meeting. The tone had shifted. Revenue was strong. Public perception had stabilized. Investors no longer asked about scandal. They asked about growth. Thomas remained composed, but something had softened at the edges. After the meeting, Thomas lingered. "I read an article," he said without looking directly at Daniel. "Which one?" "About your Tuesday afternoons." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Parents notice," Thomas continued. "So do employees. And," Thomas paused, "they seem supportive." Daniel nodded. "People respond to authenticity," he said. Thomas studied him. "You're changing the culture." "Yes." "Do you intend to?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them. "You never asked me to attend school events," Thomas said quietly. Daniel felt the shift immediately. "I didn't think you would." Thomas's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but reflection. "You might have been wrong." Daniel held his gaze. Maybe. It was not reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. That evening, Daniel arrived at Monica's apartment with a small tree strapped awkwardly to the roof of his car. Annie burst through the door before he finished untying it. "A Christmas tree." "It seemed appropriate," he said. Monica folded her arms but smiled despite herself. "You don't even celebrate much," she teased. "I'm learning." They carried the tree upstairs together, needles scattering lightly across the hallway. Annie insisted on placing every ornament herself. "This one is you," she declared, hanging a simple silver ball near the top. "And this is Mom. And you?" She paused thoughtfully. "I'm the star." Daniel laughed. "That seems accurate." As they stepped back to admire the crooked, imperfect tree, snow continued falling outside, softening the city into something quieter. Annie slipped her hand into his again. "Are you staying for Christmas?" she asked. "Yes." "For real?" "For real." She nodded solemnly. "Good." Later, after Annie fell asleep beneath the glow of the small tree lights, Daniel stood beside Monica in the dim living room. "This feels different," she said quietly. "It is. You're not visiting anymore." "No. You're choosing." "Yes." Monica studied him carefully. "Your father, he'll adjust. And if he doesn't," Daniel looked at the soft lights reflecting in the window, "then I will." Snow gathered along the sill. For years, Daniel had believed legacy meant expansion, new towers, new markets, new dominance. Now he understood something else. Legacy was smaller, quieter, built in Tuesday afternoons, missing teeth, chalk drawings, and promises kept in winter. He glanced toward Annie's bedroom door. "Broken things can be fixed," he murmured softly. Monica heard him. "Yes," she said, "if someone stays." And this time, he wasn't leaving. Christmas morning arrived without spectacle. No reporters, no headlines, no board alerts flashing across Daniel's phone. Just snow. Soft, steady, covering the south side streets in quiet white. The city felt gentler under it, less sharp. Daniel woke on Monica's couch before sunrise. He lay still for a moment, listening. The hum of the heater, the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, then footsteps. Soft, quick. Annie appeared in the doorway, hair tangled from sleep, eyes bright. "Is it morning?" He smiled. "It's morning." She gasped when she saw him already awake. "You didn't leave." "No." She ran to the small tree in the corner of the living room. The lights were still glowing faintly from the night before. There weren't many presents. A few wrapped boxes, a stuffed astronaut, a book about planets, a small jewelry box Monica had picked out weeks earlier. Annie knelt on the rug, reverent. "Can I open them now?" Daniel glanced toward the hallway. "Let's wait for your mom." Monica appeared moments later, tying the belt of her robe. "You're both impossible," she said softly. They sat together on the floor. Paper tore. Laughter filled the apartment. When Annie opened the astronaut doll, she held it up triumphantly. "He's going to the moon," she declared. Daniel felt his throat tighten slightly. "You always aim high," he said. She opened the small jewelry box last. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, 2 tiny stones set side by side. One blue, one brown. Annie looked at it, confused at first. Monica glanced at Daniel. "It's for you," he said quietly. Annie examined the stones. They look like my eyes. They do. She looked up at him. So I don't forget. He shook his head gently. So you remember. She wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. Monica watched quietly. Later that afternoon, Daniel stepped outside briefly, letting the cold air steady him. Across the street, children built uneven snowmen. Laughter drifted through the crisp air. His phone buzzed once. Thomas. He considered ignoring it. He didn't. Merry Christmas, Thomas said, voice more restrained than usual. Merry Christmas. A pause. I assume you're with them. Yes. Another silence. I won't interfere, Thomas said at last. Daniel absorbed that. Thank you. A longer pause followed. When you were 8, Thomas said slowly, you asked for a telescope. Daniel remembered. I bought you a microscope instead, Thomas continued. I said, looking down was more practical than looking up. Daniel almost smiled at the memory. I remember. You wanted to see stars, Thomas said quietly. Yes. Snow fell softly around him. I may have miscalculated, Thomas added. The admission was small, but it mattered. We all do. Daniel replied gently. Another pause. She's fortunate, Thomas said. Daniel looked back toward the apartment window where Annie's silhouette moved excitedly past the tree. I am, Daniel answered. When he returned inside, Annie tugged him toward the window. Come see. It's still snowing. He stood beside her, looking out at the white-covered street. Dad? Yes. Are you going to work tomorrow? Yes. She nodded thoughtfully. But you'll come back. Yes. How many times? He smiled softly. As many as it takes. She seemed satisfied with that. That evening, after dinner and board games and too much hot chocolate, Annie fell asleep, curled on the couch beside him. Daniel didn't move. He let her weight rest against him. Monica dimmed the lights quietly. You don't have to stay on the couch, she whispered. I'm fine. She studied him for a long moment. You could move in, she said finally. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't urgent. They were simple. Daniel looked down at Annie's small hand curled against his sleeve. I don't want to disrupt what you've built, he said. You're not disrupting, Monica replied softly. You're adding. He considered that. Are you sure? He asked. She held his gaze steadily. Yes. The snow outside thickened. Inside, the tree lights cast soft reflections across the walls. Daniel exhaled slowly. I don't want this to be temporary, he said. It isn't, Monica answered. Annie shifted in her sleep. Dad, she murmured faintly. The word was no longer fragile. It was settled. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. For years, he had measured success in acquisitions, market expansion, shareholder confidence. He had inherited a legacy built on structure and control. But sitting there in a modest apartment, snow falling outside, a child asleep against his side, he understood something his younger self never had. Legacy was not what you left behind. It was who stood beside you while you were still here. Broken things could be fixed, not by money, not by power, but by staying, and this time, he was staying. Viết đoạn văn ngắn bằng tiếng Anh về bài học trong câu chuyện, trên muốn truyền tải đến khán giả. This story reminds us that true legacy is not measured in wealth, power, or public reputation. It is measured in presence. Success can build towers of glass and steel, but it cannot replace a father who shows up, listens, and keeps his word. The lesson is simple yet profound. Responsibility is not about protecting your image. It is about protecting the people who trust you. Broken relationships, like broken wheels, can be repaired, but only if someone chooses to stay. In the end, integrity is not proven in boardrooms. It is proven in ordinary moments at kitchen tables, in school classrooms, and in the quiet promises we keep when no one is watching. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.